Hey, everybody, welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name's Henry Bingaman, and it has been an interesting week since last Friday. There's been a couple of banking collapses. So we saw Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank go belly up, the Fed's taking them over. And then Credit Suisse, which is a European bank, needed to be bailed out by the Swiss government. So, the question on everybody's mind is, what the hell is going on? Is this going to be the beginning of a major banking crisis? I've seen a lot of people talk about this over the past week, a lot of smarter libertarians than me. Dave Smith and Clint Russell did a great episode on Part of the Problem, covering what the potential fallout could be. So go check out that archive if you want a kind of in-depth take from a guy that really knows finance. But I want to take a little bit of a different angle. Now, the funny thing is, when I made my notes for this podcast, the original topic was going to be talk about overcoming imposter syndrome and the different levels of clientele you'll deal with over a freelance career. And since I'm launching my Breaking Free course about how to become a highly paid freelancer, I definitely kind of want to get to that if I can today. So we're going to test my ability of transitioning because I feel like I need to address this banking thing. It's such a big topic, and it feels like it could be the beginning of something. Now, will all the banks fail? And is there going to be multiple runs? Are there going to be multiple runs on banks? I don't know. Probably not. They seem to have bailed this one out. They kicked the can down the road for now. It's going to happen. There's going to be a banking crisis. It's inevitable with the way the system's set up. But one of the things that was on my mind this week is really thinking about why banking has become so central to the U.S. economy in the first place. If you went back to before 1900, in the early 1800s, banking was not as big a part of everyone's life as it is today. There were definitely banks, but they were mostly used by businesses and really wealthy people. Now, that's not to say a lot of middle-class people didn't have bank accounts, but the bank accounts weren't the central part of their life. That's just where they went to store their excess money. But ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve and the income tax, banking became a huge part of everybody's life. So really, it was 1913 that we created the Federal Reserve, and the income tax was passed or found constitutional somehow by the Supreme Court. So it became necessary to start tracking more and more people's money. Now, in the beginning, people forget that the income tax didn't apply to very many people. It was only ever supposed to be on the top 1 or 2% of people, and it was supposed to be a very small tax on their income. Of course, like every government program, it expands until it touches everybody. But in those early days, it wasn't necessary to track everybody's money. When really banking started taking off for the everyman was the 1930s under FDR, when he implemented Social Security. Those deposits were made by direct deposit to banks. So if you were a senior citizen collecting Social Security, you needed a bank account to be able to take advantage of it. So that really spread out or increased the number of people that had bank accounts, because all of a sudden, poor people needed to have bank accounts. Previous to that, you just get paid in cash. You go through your daily life dealing in cash. It wasn't a big deal. You didn't need a bank account unless you had more money than you wanted to store in your house. That all changed with the Depression, but really banking got enormous during and after World War II. This is a fun conspiracy to explore sometime, how they changed the definition of the American dream to say that everybody needs a mortgage and to get locked into one place locationally, and have permanent payments to the bank pretty much for 30 years at a time. Now, there's been a number of consequences of forcing all of this money into the banking system. Some of them are good, some of them are not good. One of the consequences is a lot of increased economic activity. The more money you have in the banking system, the more they can lend out. So basically the cheaper money becomes and the more business activity takes place. Now, some of that business activity is reckless and very risky, but over the long run in American history, it has led to enormous growth of the economy. But the downside is it's basically forced everyone to use the banking system. It's almost impossible to function in modern American society without a bank account. Really, they call people unbanked, as there's a crisis of the unbanked, which is why I think Elizabeth Warren was proposing that we make the post offices banks so poorer people can get free bank accounts. Of course, another consequence has been multiple banking crises over the past 100 years or so. Obviously, the Great Depression, there were some banking crises in the 70s, I think. And then 2008 was a giant one, which everybody remembers. And then today, we might be on the cusp of another one. But what's different today is I think more and more people are starting to understand just how crazy fractional reserve banking is, right? That you think you put your money in the bank and it sits there and you can withdraw it whenever, but that's just not true. The bank lends out almost all of its deposits. And basically, when was the last time the bank paid you any significant interest on deposits? Now, interest rates are starting to come up, which is actually a scary sign under the current system because it means they need liquidity in their system, and they're going to be taking, they're paying more and more money for it, basically to stabilize their own reserves. But bank runs today are a real risk, and they haven't been for 15 years at least, but really going back to the 1930s. With the creation of the FDIC, they made it way less likely for bank runs to happen. Now, if you remember back in the 30s, I think the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance, was for $1,000. So no matter what, you get $1,000 back of all your deposits. Then, of course, inflation happens over the years, and they raised it to $30,000, I think $65,000. In 2008, it was $100,000, and after that banking crisis, they raised it up to $250,000, where it sits today. But with Silicon Valley, they just proved that there's basically no cap on what the government will bail out depositors for, which, of course, will just cause massive amounts of inflation. If the entire banking system collapses at once and everybody everywhere has to withdraw all of their money or tries to withdraw all of their money and the FDIC has to back it, the insurance fund isn't that big. Which means the Federal Reserve will have to print literally trillions of new dollars to be able to make everybody whole, which will make everybody's money worth less and cause a hyperinflation crisis that we haven't seen since like the Weimar Republic. But I'm really happy to see people starting to understand that banks don't have their money. Now, it's so crazy to me that you're not allowed to own your own money. You're basically forced to put it in a bank. How else are you going to pay your bills? How else are you going to function in society? But then the bank doesn't have to pay you that money. The main reason for the banking situation we're in is the Federal Reserve. When you have a centralized authority that sets the interest rates, that decides how cheap money is to borrow, they need to force everybody into that banking system. Otherwise, the system will just collapse. But of course, they're terrible at this job. It's impossible to centralize control of what interest rates should be. You cannot dictate them to the market. The market has to tell you, which is why we keep seeing these crises. It's why we keep getting to this point in history where the banking system seems on the verge of collapse, because this banking system must collapse. It can't work over the long term. Eventually, there will be a crisis. Eventually, there's going to be a depression like we haven't seen. That's the natural consequence of having a banking system set up this way and forcing everyone into it. You're not allowing people to make decisions with their money. Now, this is why so many people are so excited about the promise of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the first time in modern history, since the creation of the Federal Reserve, where people have a chance to actually own their money. It's more functional than gold in a lot of ways because it uses the technological aspects that we all rely on to transact in everyday life. Now, it's not perfect in that, obviously, and there are some layers being built on top of it that will make it better and better over the years. But it's the first attempt to actually let you be your own bank. Now, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. I know the Bitcoiners are going to get mad at me for saying this, but Bitcoin won't necessarily win. Now, I'm betting it will, right? I own Bitcoin, but it doesn't have to be the winner. But that technology, the blockchain technology, is the future. It's going to be what I believe replaces this banking system when it eventually implodes. The question is, for right now, what can you do? And the answer, I think, is really just make yourself more resilient, right? The Federal Reserve isn't going to listen to us. They're not going to go to letting the market set the rates, right? They haven't read Mises. They haven't read Rothbard. They don't care what we have to say. We have literally zero influence over them. So because of that, the only thing you can do is become more resilient. Now, what does it mean to become more resilient? Well, for example, if you own a home and you have a mortgage, if you can afford to, pay it off. Because when you own a mortgage, you don't actually own that house. The bank owns that house. We saw this in 2008 where the bank was taking everybody's house from them. In fact, the bank went so far as to take people who'd fully paid off their houses and would just go seize them. There's people that literally lost their houses and couldn't get it back after they had fully paid it off because the bank has just too much power. Another way to become more resilient, I know I just talked about Bitcoin, and I do think that's a good bet. But remember, it's an asymmetrical bet. So I wouldn't go putting all my money in Bitcoin. The Bitcoin maxis are a little crazy to me. If the promise of Bitcoin pays off, just having 3 or 4 Bitcoin or some small portion of your wealth in Bitcoin is going to replace all this other stuff. Like you don't need to have, I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket. If the reality of Bitcoin lives up to its promise, then you don't need to own, 100,000 Bitcoin to be able to be wealthy in that new world. Just a couple is going to set you up perfectly fine. It's asymmetrical in that way. But also don't sleep on gold and silver, right? It's the oldest, these precious metals have been around for thousands of years at this point. They're not going anywhere. They always will be worth something. So if you can, put some of your money in gold, silver. Another thing to do if things really go south is own a lot of bullets. I've talked about bullets as an investment for the future. Now, there's several reasons why I think this is going to happen. First, obviously great self-protection, but there's more firearms in America famously than there are people. So stocking up on bullets means you have plenty of people that are going to be willing to trade for that. The most common calibers are 9mm for handguns and 5.56 for rifles, or 223. So if you want to make a bet on bullets, those are the calibers that I personally have stocked up on, which is partially because my AR shoots 5.56 and my handguns are almost all 9mm. But anyway, bullets are a great thing, a great barter tool, a great self-protection, all around useful things that you'll be able to trade with or sell in almost any economy in the United States. So the next thing, and Ken McCarthy pointed this out. If you don't know Ken McCarthy, he's basically the guy that invented internet marketing. He's really smart dude. If you have excess cash in banks, especially above that $250,000 limit that the FDIC insures for, you can put it in treasury bills. Ken pointed out, and I don't like the government. I don't want to invest in treasury bills. But if there's going to be a last thing to collapse in the banking system, and it will be treasury bills. The government can't let treasury bills go bad. So you can just go to treasurydirect.gov and literally invest in treasury bills. It's probably the safest place to store excess cash. You're not going to get a great return on it, but it will keep your money safe. And of course, one of the best ways to become resilient in almost any economy, whether there's a banking crisis or not, is to be able to ensure that you can always make an income. See, this is the transition to freelancing. Employees are going to get hit hard in a banking crisis, right? An employee is a long-term investment it's a long-term expense for a company to keep. A freelancer can be a one-time expense. You can be on retainer, you can be per project. So you're only being paid for the work that you need to do for that company. One of the problems that employers have with employees is that there's a lot of downtime. They're paying you to not work in some cases. As a freelancer, you're only being paid to do productive work. And you're being paid for the value of that work. The fact is, it's much more common to be able to negotiate your compensation when you're a freelancer, when you're an independent contractor just coming in for a specific job, for a thing that employer knows will provide them value. Then when you're an employee, it's pretty much, here's what the salary we offer or the hourly wage we offer, and take it or leave it. So freelancers have much better control of their income, which is why freelancers in general make a lot more money than normal employees. So why don't more people choose to do freelance work as opposed to just taking a job? I think one of the reasons is they view it as riskier. Most people view it as riskier to become a freelancer than to have a quote unquote stable paycheck. But the thing about stable paychecks, as I've talked about before, is they're not always that stable. If you're a freelancer, you usually have 3 or 4 clients. So if you lose one client, you're only losing a quarter or a third of your income. And that's easily replaced because you'll usually, once you get good at freelancing, you have a backup queue of clients. So there's people that are willing to work with you. But if you're an employee and you lose a job, you've lost 100% of your income, and all of a sudden you're in a crisis. You have to find a new job. So your stability is actually much less. Now, there's also benefits that come along with being an employee that you don't get as a freelancer, but having that extra cash in your pocket more than makes up for it. And there are a lot of ways to invest for yourself and to provide your own health insurance through things like Crowd Health. A lot of people that they're in the freelance space actually end up joining like farmers unions to get their health insurance that way. There's a lot of societies you can join that have that group health insurance packages. So I wouldn't let health insurance or benefits be the thing that stopped me from freelancing. One of, I think, the biggest things that stops people from freelancing is that they feel it's imposter syndrome, right? They don't feel up to the job. So how do you overcome that imposter syndrome? What really imposter syndrome comes down to is a lack of confidence in yourself. It happens to all of us. All of us feel inadequate at some point. But I think one of the ways to overcome this imposter syndrome is to recognize that there are a lot of different types of confidence. We think of confidence as self-confidence, kind of our overall ability to get things done. But if you break that down, you actually can be more confident in some parts of yourself than others. So, for example, some people are intellectually confident. They believe that they can figure out things. This is actually where most of my confidence comes from. It's not that I have confidence in any specific job. It's that I have confidence that I can overcome the obstacles and get that job done in the long run. Some people have emotional confidence, that they know they're going to be able to handle themselves in social situations. So that no matter how the job goes, they're going to be able to deal with the client and make things all right in the end because they can socially smooth over the situation. A lot of people have skill-specific confidence. So let's say I'm an engineer and I know I'm really good at engineering. I can do this job well. So maybe I don't have confidence in the social skills or the intellectual part of it, but I have confidence that I can get this job done well. The secret to overcoming imposter syndrome is to remind yourself what you're good at. Which type of confidence do you have? And then lean into that confidence. I know people don't like journaling, and every time I tell people to journal, they don't do it for the most part. But literally sitting down with a notebook and writing down what you're good at before you approach a client or whenever you're experiencing that imposter syndrome can help you overcome it. It's a reminder to yourself. It's literally you telling yourself that you're acceptable, that you're competent in this thing. So journaling about your skills and strength is a great way to overcome imposter syndrome. Another great way to overcome imposter syndrome is have a network of people that you can rely on. You don't have to do everything alone, even as a freelancer. In fact, especially as a freelancer. When you're inside a company, you have that natural built-in support network. When you're a freelancer, you have to build your own community. You have to build your own support network. But having a group of people that you can rely on, that you know you can go to and ask questions and get support, goes a long way in overcoming the feeling of inadequacy that a lot of us deal with, because you have that fallback option. You have people that have experience that you can rely on to give you advice. And that's why in the course I'm about to release called Breaking Free, one of the big aspects that I'm really excited about is the community. If you join this course, you're going to get to network with a lot of people at different stages of freelancing. So you're going to have some people that are just considering it, just starting, like figuring out what they're going to do and how they're going to get started. You're going to have newer freelancers, and you're going to have a lot of experienced freelancers in there as well. So people at every stage that you can rely on, that you can go to for advice, see how other people are handling problems, see how other people are getting clients, see how other people are managing clients. Now, this course, it comes out on the 27th, which is a Monday. It's going to be broken into 4 different modules. The first module is preparing to break free, which is getting ready. It's everything you need to know. It's about how to find and develop the correct skills to become a kind of category of one as a freelancer, so you really don't have any competition. Then in module 2, we're going to talk about getting clients. This is the thing everybody worries about in a freelance career. How am I going to get clients? How am I going to get paid? It's actually not that hard once you get into it. Getting clients kind of becomes second nature after you've done it a few times and you have a system ready for continuing to get clients and having a backlog of clients that you never feel like you're in desperation mode. Part 3 or module 3 is about managing clients, which is a major part of freelancing that not a lot of freelancers are actually that good at. It's something we don't think about that much. We just like to do our work, but managing clients really is how you increase your income as a freelancer. Once clients feel happy with you, they're happy to give you more work and pay you more for that work. And then module 4 is all about scaling your business. How do you get to that multi-6-figure income? How do you get to potentially a 7-figure income if you have some exceptional circumstances? So that's the Breaking Free course. There's a bunch of bonuses. It launches on the 27th. If you want to get on the wait list and get a huge discount that's never going to be repeated again, just go to henrybing.co/breakingfree. That's all one word, henrybing.co/breakingfree. So, all right, I hope I tied everything together there. This banking situation is really weird, but again, the only thing you can do is make yourself more resilient. You don't actually have that much control over how the system goes. You just have to prepare yourself and, again, get some money out of that system. I like Bitcoin. I like gold. I like bullets. If you really have a lot of excess money, treasury bonds is a great option. And become a freelancer, or at least make your career more resilient, which is what freelancing can do for you. So again, henrybing.co/breakingfree. All right, see you next week.